Warning. What you are about to see and hear is for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed on the show are our opinions and do not reflect the views of BTW21 or its staff. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel and Chad.
God is looking for someone real. People are looking for something real. Just be real. We're back here again, the Be Real Podcast. Your host, Daniel Lewis, Brother Chad Hudson.
Hello.
And we have a very, very special guest for you today. Another Patrick County boy. We're just bringing, I guess you are from Patrick County, right? Yeah. We're bringing Patrick County.
Oh, he's from Patrick County.
He's from Patrick County.
He writes about it.
Right. I can't wait to get into all this stuff. I want to learn myself. I've seen him throughout the years and just seen his books throughout the years, heard about him. Of course, I was on the radio for 8 years. I heard Tom Perry. Everywhere we'd go, people were buying his books. They were all in these different little shops and stuff we'd go see at the Landmark Center. And so it's an honor to have you out here, man. I greatly appreciate it.
So we have Tom Perry here.
Yeah, Tom Perry. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, author. Well, I mean, you can just tell us everything. You got a whole repertoire of stuff.
Well, I grew up in Patrick County in Ararat. My dad was principal at Blue Ridge and Red Bank. Red Bank's a school that doesn't exist anymore, but he was principal at both. He came to Patrick County in '59 and retired 30 years later. So we were talking a minute ago. I was like 3 years behind your mom in high school. I graduated in '79.
Imagine going to school with your dad as a principal.
Ain't that something?
We can start there if you like.
That's got to be rough.
I had him for one glorious year in the 7th grade as my principal.
And what was his name for the people that would remember him?
Well, my dad's name was Erie, E-R-I-E, and he would tell the ladies that he was irresistible.
I like it.
And he, like I said, he was in Patrick County 30 years. We started a scholarship,
Yes.
he and my mother's name, and we've raised, I think, 15 or 16 full scholarships now.
Now, what was your mother's name?
My mother was Betty.
Betty.
Betty Jane Hobbs from Augusta, Georgia. Daddy met her when he was at Fort Gordon in the Army. His joke was he met her at a barbecue stand. She didn't think that was near as funny as he thought it was. But we could have a whole podcast about him.
Right.
Well, we was doing.
Hey, we'll have him back.
He grew up in Mount Airy, went to high school with Andy Griffith, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, he was a little bit younger than Andy, but he knew him. And he was in the Army. He said he went to Germany to take Elvis's place. That was his reason for being in the Army.
Well, thank you and thank him for his services.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
But he won the football contest in Stars and Stripes magazine, and you got a free ticket, round trip ticket home, and some money, and he used that to come home and marry my mother.
There we go.
Wow.
That's great.
And he continued to do the football contest in the Enterprise and the Mount Airy News.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing how many times our family cat won the football contest in the Mount Airy News.
Ain't that something?
Yeah.
Oh,
The family
He
cat.
would send in multiple entries. Is what I replied.
Right.
And there were years I won the football contest, and the Mount Airy News had no idea I was picking the football contest in the Mount Airy News. But he was a very I get a lot of my, I guess, outgoing
yeah.
from him.
From him, yeah. That's the way I am with my dad.
Now, you realize that later on in life. Because when you're young, you don't realize that, you know, and then you start seeing, as you grow older, you start seeing you're your parents.
Yeah, you turn
You're
into
a reincarnation of your parents.
I all the time hear myself saying things that I know he would have said.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
He was just an outrageous flirt, and he because
You didn't pick that up, did
no,
you?
no, not at all. But he had so many people in the school that when he would see them later, and out of school, you know.
Yeah.
He would, especially the females, you know. I've seen my father get the triple hug where he had the daughter, granddaughter, and
Yeah.
mother all
Oh, wow.
all in school. So
Yeah.
he did that. But we started the scholarship, and we've given 5 away now, all the girls. I make them
In my father's name.
in my
All the
father's
girls.
name, and I give them to a senior at Patrick County, and we make them write a 1,000-word history essay.
Oh.
And the one that I like the best gets the scholarship.
That's really nice.
That
That's really
is.
good.
And this past year, we just gave it to Macy Hall, who is Patrick Hall, the surveyor's daughter. And Macy's grandmother was my father's secretary, believe it or not.
Really?
Well, congratulations,
But
Macy.
Macy won it outright. She wrote the best essay I've ever got so far.
What'd she do it on?
She did it on the Nazis.
Really?
Yeah, and it was
Really?
really well done. I learned things. Now,
Yeah, for somebody that young to write
yeah,
on something.
She was really good. I mean, it was really well done, and she would have won it outright, but you know, because she was my father's secretary's granddaughter, that was special.
That was special.
I wish my father had lived to see that. 'Cause
Yeah.
he would have enjoyed that.
Oh, I would love it too. I love history and stuff like that, and especially it's an age of that's the greatest generation. We talk about it often. Back in World War I and World War II, you know, I don't know where she started, but that was probably right around the 30s and 40s.
Her grandfather was Homer Hall. If you remember Homer from high school, you might have had Homer. He taught vocational at Patrick
Sounds so
County.
familiar.
you-
Yeah, I've heard
you
that
probably-
name.
You might have been a little young. I'm sure your mom would have known him.
Yeah,
but
probably would
He
have.
was out in vocational, and he was
Okay.
in Patrick County for years and years and years. But they lived next door to us. Literally grew up next door to us.
Wow.
So, Patrick is a surveyor now and pretty good at it from what I gather. He's a Hokie. But his little girl got the scholarship this year, writing about Nazis.
Right, it's pretty wild. So I guess that's all the Ararat situation, all the Ararat section of Patrick County.
Yeah, I
Down
try
there.
to give it. I have given it to ladies from other parts of Patrick County, but I try to give it to people in the Dan River District because only I and I think the Ruritan Club do a scholarship up there.
Right.
You know, so I try to give it to somebody who.
Well, you got to take care of your community.
Right, take care of your community.
Definitely.
And my father was such a big part of that area, Claudeville and Ararat, all those years.
Right, right.
but
People
I-
really love that area. I mean, when you go down there, they're proud to be from Ararat and all that. It's kind of. I grew up in Kreitz. I don't claim to be from Stewart at all. If you're from Patrick County, you probably would get that.
You would
But
understand,
you
right.
would understand. But
I thought until I was about 30 years old that darn bunch and Stewart was all one word.
Well, we have the same thing on the other side in Kreitz there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And let's not even talk about those Medezadan people.
oh
how they
boy,
feel,
well,
how they feel about it.
they're from a different elevation.
Yes,
if I can
yes.
say it.
And they're not real happy with the road construction right now. I can tell.
They are destroying that mountain,
Yeah,
but
it's a sight. It really
is a
is.
sight. But when it's done, the kids will be safer and everything. And
Yeah.
I think it'll bring a lot of commerce, especially to Patrick Springs.
right.
Now, Stewart, not so much, but definitely
bypass
Patrick.
Stewart.
Yeah, they done bypass Stewart, so
Yeah, 4-lane highway usually will help your economy.
Right.
As a rule.
we hope.
Bypasses not so much.
Yeah,
That's right.
we'll see.
But growing up, you might have been a little young for this, but Dan, and still is, a big tourism thing. I mean, we used to ride the Dan River Queen. We had a riverboat at the zoo.
Now you sent me a picture of that, and that's
yeah.
probably up in there somewhere.
Yeah, we have, but
Dan River Queen.
Yeah, and this Shania probably don't know what the Dan
My
River Queen is,
grandfather's got some old footage of that. Old
Oh,
video.
the only footage I have ever seen.
yeah, I've seen that.
yeah.
I've seen
You've
that.
seen it.
Yeah, we've got a lot. There we go. Hey.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah, there she is.
All right.
She's
so-
on it. She's
Wish we
always
could have
on it.
played the
Thank you,
footage.
Shania.
We
Yeah.
got there's something on YouTube. It's called the Dan River Queen at Rare.
We need a Mark Twain quote now.
Yeah, but that was really something because I'd seen pictures like this for years. Not particularly this picture, but not the color anyway. I've always seen black and white pictures of her for years. And then Chad was like, "My grandpa's got some actual footage," and I was like, "What, video?" He's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And so when he brought me
stuff.
that video, I was like, I got to put that on YouTube because I have never. That's probably the only I'm sure there's probably something else out there. Somebody's got something, but I had never seen it anywhere else.
Well, if you collect postcards for Patrick County, the
Yeah.
two things you're going to find in the postcards in Patrick County are going to be Mabry Mill, which is kind of is it or isn't it in Patrick County?
Floyd.
It's in Floyd. It's on the line, or the Dan River Queen.
Yeah.
And the postcards are almost always that. you
Yep.
know. But I've seen Mabry Mill on Greetings from Connecticut. And,
Really?
Oh yeah. There's all kinds of stuff like that.
That's Mabry Mill. It's
That's
in my
Mabry Mill.
backyard. Greetings from Connecticut.
But no, but we rode that thing. I remember doing Boy Scout camporees. We'd ride the Dan River Queen over and camp out.
Really?
We were Boy Scouts, yeah. Cold. Oh my goodness, it was cold up
Now-
there on the other end of the lake.
oh, I bet.
What was the last year that ran? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. It ran well into when I was. I'm pretty sure it ended when I was in high school, or maybe before I was in high school.
70, 71,
Yeah,
somewhere
maybe
around in
somewhere
there.
in there. I'm not really sure.
I've heard
I'm not
that
really
69, 70 is what I've always heard, but I don't know.
I've
That
seen
sounds about right.
I've seen pictures of it now, and it just breaks your heart.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen it now, and it's just
Yeah, there's a sign on the side.
skeleton.
It says "Repent, it's going to rain."
I mean, the pond or whatever it was on is gone
Oh,
and
really?
everything. Yeah.
Guys, when I was in high school, some of the guys I knew, their thing to do on Halloween or something was go up there and open the water on the dam so the lake would go down, and they'd beach the Dan River Queen.
That's funny.
That is cool.
I refuse to answer any more questions on that.
This is an interrogation.
On the grounds that I may incriminate, but no, it wasn't me. But it was some guys I knew. But you know, Patrick County's got a lot. You're talking about Ararat. I like to say that the three most famous people probably from Patrick County, other than R.J. Reynolds, you know, came out of Ararat. It'll probably surprise you who it is. Obviously, it's Jeb Stewart.
Yeah.
And it's Bob Childress, the man who moved a mountain.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Bob Childress
Built the rock churches.
the rock churches.
We stopped by there.
Yeah.
He was a blacksmith in Ararat until he was about 40 years old.
Really?
And he got the calling and went to Richmond and did the seminary and came back and started doing the rock churches.
Huh.
And
There's 7 of those,
yes,
six or
maybe
7.
more than that, really. One of them is not a rock church. There's one that's still wooden plank church.
Oh, really? He built that one.
But I worked with his grandson, a fellow named Stuart Childress, and Stuart was we worked at Insteel in Mount Airy together. And Stuart, when he got about 40, he got the calling too, and he went to Richmond to the seminary, and he was preacher. He still preaches, I think, at Buffalo Mountain, where his grandfather is buried. But Bob Childress was a blacksmith in Ararat growing up.
Building rock churches at a blacksmith.
Yeah, he was a blacksmith, and the churches, I think, were already built. What he did was he got them to put the rocks on the side.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But he quite a fellow. We're going to have a program in July at Ararat about Bob Childress. I think we're calling it Before and After He Moved a Mountain or something.
Yeah,
but
neat.
There's a new book out by Kathy Vestal, who is, I think, related to Bob. And it's all about the Childress family. And I think we're going to try to get Stuart to come there, and we're going to talk about him before and after. You know, he became a preacher. So
that
we're doing
would be really neat.
The Ararat Rurchin Club has been very good supporting me. We use it to raise money for our scholarship over there. And we're doing that July 15th at the Rurchin Club.
Okay.
So we're going to have a Childress family reunion, I guess.
Nice. Well, that'd be really neat. Those churches are something. If nobody's ever went and seen those, you can find them. They're on every spur road there is in Patrick County.
And up on top of the
up in
mountain,
Carroll,
too.
and it's all up in there.
And the other person is
Floyd.
Ann Orlena Puckett, who was the midwife, Puckett's cabin.
I just saw an article about her, I think, a couple months ago.
On the Parkway. She lived in Ararat most of her life, too, and lived up near where we call Doe Run, where the Doe Run Baptist Church is. And, she midwifed maybe 1,000 kids, Bob Childress being one of them, and lost every one of her own. She lost every one of her own
so
children.
sad.
20 plus.
Golly.
I think it was probably an RH factor in the blood, positive,
something in there.
negative,
Yeah,
and they
just
didn't have
don't know back
medicine
then.
then. Right.
Yeah.
And all her children are buried up past the Doe Run Church. And they're just field stones, 20 little field stones.
Wow. Ain't that something?
But those are the three from Ararat who aren't famous for criminal activity.
There's some of those.
There are some of those. Now, I had just kind of off subject there, but I had the honor of meeting when I worked at another place. I can't really say where I worked at, but Stan Smith. He's a brigadier general, and he told me, I don't know, he's the only one other general that I know that come out of Patrick County besides Jeb Stewart.
Yeah,
so
I think you're right.
I thought that was pretty neat.
I was really lucky. I grew up with some fellas who were really characters. One of the guys I grew up next door to literally was Zeb Scales. Old Zeb was the deputy for Calvin Harbor. He wasn't the sheriff, but he was the next in line.
Oh, yeah.
And Zeb literally lived next door. He was a command sergeant major in the U.S. Army.
Really?
He was in Korea and Vietnam.
Oh, man.
And he was one of those guys he would never talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like guys who really, my experience, guys who have really seen combat won't talk about it.
Right.
But Zeb lived next door to me, and after he passed away, I was over at the house one day, and I noticed they had this little shadow box on the side, and I got looking at this thing, and oh my goodness, there was a Purple Heart. I think there were a couple of bronze stars, and there was a silver star in this thing. And I got looking at that. And I came to realize that I think he was probably the most decorated soldier ever to come out of Patrick County.
Ain't that something?
And we got the bridge over the Dan River named after him.
Really?
Yeah, the one over there, we're close to Kibler Valley. It's in the curve. It's real kind of a really sharp curve thing.
Yeah. Oh, really sharp curve.
Really sharp curve.
Yeah.
And Zeb, when we were growing up, we wait on the bus and get on the bus and go to Patrick County High School, which for some of the guys I rode the bus with, it was over an hour.
Yeah.
Well, Zeb, being deputy, every once in a while he'd take pity on us on a really cold day, and he'd come out of the driveway in his big green Chrysler, things shaking the whole world, making such a big noise because it'd fly. He was a deputy car, and he'd pull over and pick us up, me and his kids, and we'd ride to school with him.
Oh, wow.
And we'd cross that bridge, and every time we crossed that bridge, we'd get the history of that bridge about how he helped build it.
Really?
And by about the fourth or fifth time, his children's eyes are kind of rolling back up in their heads. But I'm just like fascinated by all this stuff. And so after he passed away, I said to his kids, we ought to get that bridge named after him because he said he helped build it. And we did. We got it named after him.
I love those recurring stories. That's how stories are passed on.
Yeah.
That's how that information is passed on.
Right, and that bridge will never be the same to me because I know exactly which one you're talking about.
And you'll see the sign now when you cross that bridge.
I'll notice it now.
You'll notice the
I have
sign.
to slow down, But
Kibler Valley is my place. I love fishing up there.
Well, you go past Kibler and go down Bateman Straight, and then it's right there.
Yeah, there's like a curve to the right, and then it's a hard left off that bridge.
And that was Meadowfield. We called that Meadowfield.
Hard right off the bridge.
Meadowfield, and believe it or not, that's where Andy Griffith's mother grew up.
Really?
Yeah, that's where Andy Griffith's mother grew up. Her name was Geneva Nunn, N-U-N-N.
Yeah.
So my joke is, Andy Griffith's mother was a nun.
I know some nuns in that area too.
Yeah.
Florida.
They're related.
Nun.
Yeah, they're related to Andy. They're Andy's cousins. If they're none in Patrick County, they Andy's cousins.
I think Darlene
was something.
Wasn't Darlene a nun?
I don't know.
But
She's still a nun, ain't she?
But Andy's mom grew up there, which we so associate him with Mount Airy and everything. But all his mom, his people were from Patrick County.
Yeah.
And
I'd heard that story before. I wasn't sure, but I'd heard.
And
I
think that's where the music side, Andy's music side, comes from his family in Patrick County.
Guitar picking.
Yeah, he was really good, and I think that's where he got it, was from his mom.
He really could act, and he could sing and everything, even in his other stuff, not just the Andy Griffith show.
I liked performers back then. They seemed to be able to do that, sing, dance, act.
Real.
Do the tap dance.
And it was real.
And it was real stuff that they grew up doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's Andy's mom on the cover of my
Well,
let's see that. Yeah, we need to talk about these books. But
absolutely.
But that's Andy's mom.
So why do we have these books here?
Well, somebody wrote them, I guess.
Who's that? That'd be nice to know.
These books I either wrote or published, and that's Andy's mom and dad there on the cover.
We got another Andy over here.
I'm going to hold that for him, Chad, right there. Can you zoom in there? I'm sorry. Miss Shania, we're going to put her to work. She's already working hard.
This is my book about Andy and Mount Airy.
Oh, she's got to come in here and manually do it.
This is the trivia
Did Louise
book.
break it?
Did you break it?
Did you break it, Mr. Romero? No, not this time.
You used to be able to do it with the little mocha troll over there.
There we go. Beyond Mayberry Revised.
Yeah, that's about Andy and Mount Airy.
Is that his parents
That's
right there?
his parents. It's 1957. It was Andy Griffith Day in Mount Airy. They were releasing this movie he was in called A Face in the Crowd.
Yeah.
And if you've never seen A Face in the Crowd, it sure ain't Sheriff Taylor.
No,
Let me tell you.
no, it's a little different there.
It's probably the best acting job he probably
Right.
ever did. And the other book is a trivia book I published for a friend of mine called Scott Hopkins. Scott actually lives up in Cincinnati.
Mayberry Trivia.
And it's just trivia from the show.
Yeah.
And both of those books now have been out almost a decade, and they're still the best-selling books I have.
I got a buddy of mine. He is really into the Andy Griffith show. I mean, he
But
talks
that,
about
So
it.
this is actually a game. This isn't reading
You
trivia.
can use
This
it as a
actually
game.
yeah.
Yeah, you
question-
sure could.
questionnaires and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
Answer
yeah.
the questionnaire.
But it's
That's great.
But that book's
We're gonna have to get into that.
yeah. We could
Buy one of those.
we could do a whole podcast on that.
Right. We can see how much we know.
Since he's zoomed in, you want to show the other ones? There we go. Yeah,
Oh,
we can just
sure.
go ahead and start talking about all
This
of
is
them.
this is my Murder in the Rearview Mirror, and it's two meanings. You know, murder, looking in the past at murder.
Yeah.
And there's a couple in Martinsville, Henry County over here. The Martinsville 7 is in that book. There's a chapter.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, she's got a picture of it
Locke
right
told
there.
me about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martinsville Seven.
And it's all along the Virginia-North Carolina border. It's different murder stories.
Okay.
Every chapter is a different one.
So I guess it got the Lawsonville murders in
It's
there.
got Charlie Lawson in it. Obviously, it's got the Hillsville shootout because that's the Allen
Oh, yeah,
house.
that's the Allen house right there. on
And
the
I give
cover.
them a little cut off of every one of them to help them. They're restoring that house.
Yeah.
And they're really doing a great job on that.
Oh, that's a tourism draw right
Yeah,
there.
It will be. They will be
You
when
go
they're
up,
done.
go up to the courthouse. Of course, everybody knows there's still bullet holes right there in
Oh,
the
yeah.
steps going up. I thought that was pretty wild.
But every chapter is a different murder story along the Virginia-North Carolina border. A couple in Mount Airy, a couple in Stewart, a couple over here.
Well, neat. Now that's one I want to read right there. I don't know. I'm into the crime stuff. I don't know why, but it's just
Katie's into that.
maybe because I'm a Questenberry. I don't know. We're either in jail or mechanics
Right. Katie's into
or on
that
podcasts.
mystery stuff too. I'm sitting there trying to go to sleep, and she's watching some murder mystery. It kind of scares me a
Well,
little
the
bit.
funny thing about that book is if I'm out at a festival or something, almost always I sell that book to the ladies. I never sell that
Really?
book to a man.
Oh.
They all, I think, are watching that ID Discovery Channel way too much,
Right.
and or going down to the South Carolina to sit through the Murdoch trial.
Oh
or
yeah,
something
I was a
like
big
that.
fan of that. It took me
Yeah.
a while to get through it. I think they found him guilty before I even got to the third day.
But every chapter in there is, like I said, a murder story. And
The chicken nose, man, the Murdoch. If you want to go there, the chicken nose, and the two dogs, they know too,
but
and God.
so that book really does very well.
Yeah.
It's very well.
What else we got over there?
Well, I've got this book, which is my good friend Judge Woody Lookabill, who's a judge. He was a retired judge at Pulaski. You ever hear of the Gina Hall, Steve Epperly murders that happened in Radford about the time I
Kinda
started Virginia
sounds
Tech?
familiar.
There's a guy who's Ron Peterson's written a book about it called Under the Trestle.
Under the trestle.
And this is a very famous. Woody was a Judge Lookabill was an attorney in this murder case. He was forced to represent Epperly, who was convicted of the murders, starting a long line of Virginia Tech football players who ended up in jail for murder or other crimes.
Really?
He was the first one.
Wow. Huh.
But he played football at Tech. And
So
being
under the
a Hokie,
trestle.
being a Hokie, I can say that now. If anybody else said but Woody's about to come out with his third book, which is kind of a memoir of his life.
Yeah.
But he was a judge in Pulaski, and he represented Steve Epperly in the Gina Hall murder. It's the first time Virginia ever convicted anybody without a body.
Really?
Yeah, and it was in the early '80s, about the time I started at Tech.
Yeah.
He picked her up at the Marriott there in Blacksburg, the place I went to on Fridays for happy hour. Some reason Michael Jackson's Billie Jean just came into my mind. But he
About the
picked,
year it come out.
about the time it came out, and he picked her up there, and she was never seen again. And
He's the last
he
one.
was the last one seen with her, and it became a very famous murder case. And
Never found the body.
still to this day, have never found her body. There's a documentary about it, I think, coming out next year.
To convict somebody without the body, there had to have been some
Major
major evidence on the case.
evidence.
But the
That'd
other
be
book
another good book.
is Ron Peterson's Under the Trestle, which is about the whole the whole case. And I give Ron a plug because every time Ron does a book signing, Woody's book sales go up extra.
That's neat.
You know that thing on Amazon where if you buy this book, you could also buy this book.
Oh, yeah.
Which is about the same thing. And people, every time Ron's book comes out,
So everybody's looking kind of
they buy Woody's book.
neat.
So you learn these things after a while.
Right.
After a while. But
You got another one over there?
well, I've got
Plenty.
I've got
That's the newest one.
my buddy Danny Martin's got a book about moonshine.
Now everybody knows Danny Martin. If you live in Patrick County,
Yeah.
you've come across him, or you've heard about him, or you've met him,
Or you ran from them.
or you ran from him,
Or both.
or his wife.
Both. Danny is an interpretive ranger up Fairystone now, and we were talking about this earlier. He was my 9th grade algebra teacher,
That's great.
and we've known each other for decades. But I think, in 9th grade. He taught algebra, and he has written a book about moonshine, and part of it is about how they made moonshine. Part of it's about crimes
Does it
relating.
give
to moonshine.
detailed instructions on how to make moonshine?
Ingredients, what time.
He doesn't. I don't think he gives portions.
Just portions.
He doesn't give portions.
The book is now gone.
But the thing that's great about this book is he has a whole chapter in that book about Jimmy Rohr. And you remember Jimmy was an ABC officer here in Patrick County.
I'd heard.
Danny was a deputy sheriff in Patrick County. Jimmy's the guy who would go out in the woods and watch you and try to catch you with your
Oh, wow.
Not me.
Steel.
He says you as a whole, not me.
He's looking at you. Looking right at Chad.
But Jimmy grew up in Ararat and lived in Ararat. I went to school with all 3 of his children. He had one daughter who was older than me, one daughter who was the same age as me, and of course his son was Darrell, the deputy. He was the deputy in Patrick County. So whole chapter about Jimmy in this thing, and Jimmy. There's a few people in my life that I wish I'd written a book about, and Jimmy Rohr is one of them.
Right.
But
Wow.
Danny came to me and said he had done this, and I was more than happy to help.
So
him.
Daryl's Jimmy's
Son.
son? Oh, okay, cool. And so Matt's Daryl's son. Is that the same roars?
I don't know if
Just kind of fall in line there in the
I'm not
Patrick
sure
County
if
Sheriff's Department.
I'm not sure how that works exactly. I'm not sure
Okay.
if Matt is his.
Now I know Matt's Daryl's son, but it's Daryl Rohr. I don't know if we're talking about the
then
same
it's probably
one.
the same one.
It's
Yeah,
probably
I
the same
can't imagine there's 2 of them.
I can't either.
I'll pay for that at Boyd's Restaurant on Wednesday.
Now, he's from the Patrick Springs area. Daryl was. So
All
it
right,
might
well,
be
this
the
is a
same one.
different Daryl.
Oh, different Daryl.
That's a
Okay.
different Daryl, 'cause,
Okay, gotcha.
This Daryl grew up. He was a couple of years younger than me
Oh,
in
okay.
Ararat.
Okay.
But Jimmy was his dad, my Daryl's dad, and he was, like I said, the ABC officer, and he literally would hide out in the woods and catch you at your still and arrest you. And,
Wow.
I witnessed him one time arresting somebody. I didn't really mean to do it, but I was one of my buddies who will remain nameless. I went to his house one day to we were working on a car or something. I don't know, boys do when you're teenagers. And, well, Jimmy had apparently tried to arrest this guy's father right before I arrived, and the father took umbrage to it and apparently took a whack at Jimmy and jumped in his truck and took off down the driveway. And my other neighbor, Zeb Scales, caught him, I think, before he hardly got down the road. But Jimmy came around the corner of the house, and I never will forget this. He had his gun out, and he was holding the side of his head where the guy had hit him, and the family dog went after him. And I grabbed hold of the family dog, and a mad Jimmy Rohr with a gun looks at you and says, "Tom, you hold on to that dog or I'll kill him.
Wow.
You pay attention."
That's right. That's right. We're not messing around here.
And that's my Jimmy story. That's not in there, but a lot of other Jimmy stories are.
Man.
But Danny is, like I said, a ranger up at Fairystone. He's up at their farmer's market they do on Monday nights with that book. And he has a little still that he uses to show people
Oh,
what
neat.
it looks like. So if you want to go up there and get some instruction,
Yeah.
he might help you out. I
Now,
don't know.
where'd you say Fairystone Park?
Fairystone Park, they have a little farmer's market on Monday evenings.
Monday evenings,
5 to 7.
5 to
and
7,
He's
Fairystone
almost
Park.
always there.
Nice.
And he will sell you one of those books. And
Right.
he might tell you how to make it. I don't know.
Probably not, though.
Probably not.
So,
Well, we do have to take a break. Hate to interrupt you, but I want to get back and I want to talk a little bit more about that book, but we all have several other ones too, especially that one right there. That really intrigues me. And we'll be right back right after
All right,
this.
let's do it.
Yeah. Here we are. We've got a little special message for you from the Be Real table.
Right. But
Brother
here
Chad.
in Henry County, this Saturday, May 20th at Pet Sense Martinsville,
2 days away.
2 days away, they are having an adoption fest. You just get down there and adopt one of the pets. I'm not sure if they're going to have pets there or videos of the pets there, but they're doing a special deal down there.
Henry County
Animal
Shelter.
Shelter. Go down there and get an animal.
This Saturday. You got a time?
No, I think it's
All day
let me
situation.
read here. 10 to 2.
10 to 2.
10 to 2.
10 to 2.
So go
All
down
kind
there
of
and get you a
specials.
pet.
You get you a furry friend. They need a home.
We've seen them. They're great pets. They're great animals.
Good deal. Yeah, y'all take care of them down there, Boys Holland.
Yeah, we do.
Greatly appreciate y'all.
All right.
All right. Good deal.
Bye now.
And we're back. Mr. Tom Perry has joined us with his collection of books. Not only has he written, but also produced, I guess you'd say.
Edited.
Published.
Published. That's
Wrote,
how you say
published.
it. Yeah, I'm still in the movie world. I haven't got really into the book world. Long time. But before we get going, I wanted to mention this. We kind of just talked about it, but not in front of everybody else. Where can we purchase these books?
Sure, Dana. They're all on Amazon. I have
Right.
an Amazon page. You can get them there. But in Stewart, you can get them at the Hatter's Pearl. Mezzadine, you can get them at Poor Farmers Market, Poppy's, Mezzadine Grocery, Jerry and Connie's, the Poor Farmers Farm, the Mayberry Trading Post. I'm
Wow.
big in Mezzadine.
Yeah.
In Martinsville, the only place you can get them in Martinsville is the Made in Martinsville store downtown. And that's the place I have them there, and at Bassett at the Riverwalk. If you go
Okay.
into Bassett at the Riverwalk, because over in Martinsville, there's not as many places to sell them as there are.
Yeah.
And most of them, I've written quite a few Henry County books that have a connection
Right.
over here too. So,
And we were getting ready to talk about some of it. I think we're going to have you back out here, and we'll kind of dive into this will be the Patrick County section
Edition.
of
Right.
Patrick County edition of
Well,
Tom Perry. Now we call you Thomas Perry or Tom
you
Perry.
can call me Tom.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Only my mother called me Thomas, and that usually was not a good sign.
I know that.
Right.
I know that.
If
Well,
you don't-
I'm Daniel Quessenberry, and when Mom said Daniel Lewis, it was on.
Yes.
That's my middle name. I
Yes,
was
and
like,
if I
Daniel
ever-
Lewis, and I was like, oh boy.
If I ever got Thomas David, I knew it was on me.
Right.
Talking about having the father as principal, you knew you were in trouble when you heard those. You heard all your name being pronounced. But anyway, this started for me. Oh goodness, I guess you blame my mother on all this. She was a voracious reader. That woman could read a book a day without even thinking about it.
Really?
And I was an only child, so I was her world, and she really pushed it on me. She really pushed,
Yeah.
some kids get, toys and stuff. I got books for Christmas.
Yeah.
And actually kind of like
you
that.
What a blessing.
yeah.
Underlining blessing there.
Right. And you said she was out of Georgia now. Was she a homemaker, or did she actually have a
Oh, no.
profession?
My
or-
mother was the independent working woman before there was such a thing as an
Yeah.
independent worker. She worked for Georgia Pacific for almost a decade.
Oh, wow.
Before she even met my father.
Yeah.
And she was from Augusta, Georgia. My mother never could understand why everybody thought it was such a big deal to go to the Masters. She went all the time for free.
Wow.
And
That's
she
neat.
just didn't understand why it was such a big deal. But my grandparents lived, about 2 miles from the Augusta National Golf Club. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
And if you've never been to that golf course, you wish you had carpet in your house like they have grass.
Really?
In that
Years
golf
and
course.
years
Yeah,
and years.
it's unbelievable.
I can
But
imagine.
my mother, she saw Dwight Eisenhower because he'd come and play golf down there all the time.
Wow.
He'd go to the Presbyterian Church right up the street from where my mom grew up. So she worked there, and when she got married, she came to Patrick County. Now I'm trying to imagine what it must have been like for my mother to come from the city of Augusta, Georgia, which is a fairly big place, to beautiful downtown Ararat, Virginia in 1959.
Oh, wow.
They lived in a little square house beside the Ruritan Club is today, and she worked for Dr. Tullidge, who had a doctor's office up there in Ararat. He later went to Claudville and his doctor's office is still there. It's where I guess Gerald Collins' Container Services is located.
Really?
That was Dr. Tullidge's office. So my mom worked for Dr. Tullidge for several years, and then she went to work for Quality Meals. And she worked for Quality Meals for almost 40 years.
Wow.
She worked in the shipping department, and I think she's probably about the last one out the door when they closed Cross Creek Apparel down. But she was a working woman. She went to work every day, and I went down to Theodore and Bertie Gwynn's, and that's where I stayed until we started school. And I grew up with their kids, which meant you went to the tobacco field when you were about 6 or 7.
Mercy.
And you stayed there until you were 16.
I missed that era, but I've heard about some priming tobacco.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Just such a fun job.
It was great. We had
Real fun.
We had 8-track player on the tractor, and
Wow.
it was a fight to see who got to drive the tractor and all that sort of thing. But we would have wars over an 8-track. I mean, these kids they think, "What's an 8-track?"
Yeah.
But Theodore, the father, he liked Loretta Lynn, so we'd listen to Loretta. And then I was a humongous Beatles fan, so we would go from Loretta Lynn to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. We get to the barn, and Bertie would like she liked Conway Twitty and Charlie Pride, so we'd listen to both of them at the barn. And it became a war fighting over this 8-track, but it was fun, you know.
Oh, yeah.
We would come out of the tobacco field and have lunch and collapse for about an hour before we went back to work. And man, those were the days. I still look back on that with just incredible fondness, because we pinto beans never tasted so good in my life as they
I
did
bet.
when we came
I
out
can't
of the tobacco
imagine.
field. But tobacco was such a big thing then.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Patrick County, what's Patrick County known for? R.J. Reynolds, and
Right.
that is you know, how he got started really kind of during the Civil War. He grew up during the war. He was too young to fight, so his brother Abram did, and Abram came back without the use of one of his arms for fighting in that war. But you probably went to Hardin Reynolds school. Hardin Reynolds was their father, and Hardin Reynolds was the first real tobacco king, you know, in Patrick County.
Yeah.
You had the Harstons over here, and the Reynolds and Staples and people like that in Patrick County. And it was always funny about Hardin Reynolds. He would do this, and I think I'm right about this. He would plant a field of corn, and the first 5 rows would be corn, and the middle of the field would be tobacco, because you weren't really supposed to grow tobacco during the war. You're supposed to grow food to help the war effort. Yeah. But Hardin, he was going to help the Hardin effort, I guess. And you know, RJ goes off to grow.
People still got to smoke and chew.
Yeah. RJ's a famous story about RJ Reynolds during the war. He was given instructions by his father to go take all their livestock and cattle and stuff and take it up on No Business Mountain, because, you know, you got no business being up there.
Yeah.
And to keep the Yankee cavalry from getting them.
Now, I've often wondered where that name come from.
I think
because it's right there in Patrick Springs. No Business Mountain is just right there.
You got no business going up there. You got no business going up.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, but I would dare say there might have been a few moonshine stills later on up on that thing. But RJ, of course, grew up and went to Winston-Salem because that was the closest railroad.
Yep.
And I always think, just imagine if the Danville and Western, the Dick and Willie had been built.
Oh, wow.
He would have not left Patrick County.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been to Winston-Salem, I'm sure.
Tobaccoville and all that. You'd have RJR right there and everything in Patrick County.
The eastern end of Patrick County, probably a pretty good-sized city.
Right.
Because of R.J. Reynolds.
Yeah.
But they didn't have a railroad. Mm. That's what he needed. And so he went to Winston-Salem. I don't know if you're ever downtown Winston, there's a statue of him right in front of what used to be the Wachovia building. I guess it's Wells Fargo. Young R.J. Reynolds riding into Winston.
I've been in downtown a million times, and I've never paid attention. I need to look more.
It's right there in front of the bank.
You're kind of worried about traffic. I mean, it's crazy down there now, so you don't really get to look around. But
I like
need
to
go
say,
down there and just look.
I like to say he put the hyphen in Winston and Salem.
That is cool. It is cool.
But he got his start during the Civil War, and that's where I got my start. You know, I grew up very interested in history, and Jeb Stewart, who lived right down the road. My mother said when I was about 10 years old that I just became obsessed with Jeb Stewart. And of course, that led later to a bunch of us saving his birthplace or part of his birthplace.
Yeah.
About 30.
James Yule Brown.
James Yule Brown, named after his uncle, who was a judge up in Wythe County. And J.E.B., I think they ran out of names by the time they got to Jim. They had 11, 12 children. Really? And, he was the last boy that survived. So he's named after Uncle. James Yule Brown, who was a guy up in Wytheville who was a judge. So Jeb grew up there in Ararat. And the only thing there when I was a kid was the state historic marker. And my mother said that's what got me interested in it.
Yeah.
That sign. I went to Virginia Tech, and I had James I. Robertson, who was the great Civil War historian up there. And that really got me going. Yeah. And so in the late 80s, we started talking about trying to save that place.
Yes.
And now it is. There's 75 acres of it is preserved.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that big.
Yeah,
75 acres.
So, not to interrupt you, but what's your favorite story or of Jeb Stuart? That might surprise people that haven't read up on him or.
Well, the thing about Jeb Stuart that's it's very controversial now with all the statues and everything being tore down, portraits and stuff.
Yeah.
And he.
Thank you, Judge Clark.
Yeah. We don't. Well, I've written a book about that too, but we made a whole show for that.
About that subject.
Yeah, trust me, it ain't all I got to say about it.
That's all I got to say about that.
But. Jeb Stuart was, he's known as being very flamboyant in the life of the party, but Jeb Stuart was not what you think he was. He was a teetotaler. Man didn't drink. He was a very devout Christian.
Yeah.
Which surprises people. They think of him, you think of him as Errol Flynn in Santa Fe Trail. He's the life of the party. But he wasn't. He was a very conscientious man. Now, he had fun. He was bluegrass before bluegrass was cool.
Oh, neat.
But he had a banjo player and a band that rode around with him. He loved it. He had a great voice. But he was a very devout man. He was a teetotaler, promised his mother he wouldn't drink, and best I can tell, he really never broke that vow to her. Huh. I don't know what that says about his daddy exactly.
Yeah, don't you be like
that. Right, there's usually a behind-the-scenes story.
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And I know a little bit about this because my father was a complete teetotaler, and my grandpa liked to have a drink.
Yeah.
And I think fathers and sons react to things like that. But,
yeah.
But the thing about old Jeb is Jeb was a very competent soldier. He'd been to West Point.
Yeah.
He graduated. He had been in the U.S. Army for about 7 years when the war started. So he was a very competent soldier. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, all these men knew who he was. They knew what his competence level was. And, he rose to be the commander of all of Robert E. Lee's cavalry, which was about 10,000 men.
Wow.
In 1863, when Jeb Stuart would have been 30 years old.
That's amazing.
30 years old, commanding 10,000 men as a major general.
Right.
Now, you get into all the controversies and stuff. I actually have written a book about it. I call it A Portrait of Jeb Stuart, and it looks at what Martin did. It looks at the renaming the high school in Fairfax. It was Jeb Stuart High School.
Yeah. And
it looks at the statue on Monument Avenue they took down.
Yeah, I'm thankful I got to see that before they did take it down. What
I do is I go back through the history of all that and things like that. Just to give you an example, they named it Jeb Stuart High School in Fairfax because in 1861, that's where he camped. He literally camped right where the high school. In Fairfax, where the high school was. It wasn't they didn't name the high school to, glorify slavery or anything like that. They literally named it that because that's where he camped.
Yeah, history.
And that sort of thing. So, you can have a whole podcast on all that. And I wrote a book about it because I wanted to, people always asking me, what I thought about what Martin did and what all this stuff. And I wanted to write a book about it. And it took me about 5 years because they never would decide what they were going to do on Monument Avenue. And they still really haven't. The birthplace has tried to get the statue and bring it to Ararat. But the city of Richmond won't do that. So that's all, controversial and all that sort of thing. But when we started the birthplace all those years ago, what I wanted to do with it was to show the whole history of the country, because you could go back to the American Revolution, where his great-grandfather was killed there during the Revolution. You have an antebellum farm site. We have a slave cemetery. They weren't the largest slave owners in Patrick County because their names weren't Reynolds or Harston, but they were about top 5. So I wanted to tell the story of those people too, and and bring it up through the war. So I wanted it to be a place where you could get all of that history, not just a place to glorify the Confederacy or anything, but to talk about all the history,
Everything that happened.
everything that had happened on that one particular piece of property.
Right, just right there.
Right there. They had 1,500 acres, and we've preserved 75 of them.
Ain't that something? Out of all the places in America, out of all the places in Virginia, right there. So it's pretty neat,
But it's been preserved now, and it's on the national and state registers of historic places.
Oh, good.
And it's owned by a private trust.
Right.
And so there's, no government intervention and all this stuff you see today.
Thankful.
But that might have been the smartest thing we did was keep it private.
Yes.
Not give it to the county or the state.
Right.
But they hold a Civil War reenactment out there every October, and you can go see that. And that sign that started this whole story is now out there. I got it from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. About 2 years ago, I gave it to the birthplace, and it's sitting out there. And that's what really
Nice.
got me interested in history is about a 9 or
That
10
sign. Ain't that something,
That
man?
one sign,
That
yeah.
sign right there near the house. So you showed me a book. And it's got 17-year-old Jeb on it.
Yeah, this is it right here.
I don't know if she can zoom in again.
She
We
can
might have
zoom
to.
in.
Yeah, we're sorry.
But that's okay. This is Jeb Stewart without the beard.
Jeb Stewart without the beard.
He's about 17 years old here.
17 years old. I'd never seen that before.
And he's at West Point. And he's having what I can only describe as a very bad hair day.
Oh, so this is West Point.
I have those as well.
Yeah.
I just showed it off.
Jeb was redheaded.
Yeah.
He's redheaded, blue-eyed. He's about 5'10", 5'11". Huh. He looked really good on a horse, not so much off the horse. He was kind of barrel-chested and long-armed. And, when he was at West Point, his classmates thought that he was so ugly that they called him Beauty.
Really?
And
Beauty.
you imagine how college guys are. They didn't really mean that to be a nice thing.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So he's, but there
He's a
he
good-looking
is.
fella to me. I mean,
He got the big forehead and no chin.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, that's the way it is. General in the making.
But another Civil War story I was going to tell you, since we got it closed up, is this one.
Yeah.
This is the strange case of Not Adams.
Not Adams.
And I heard this story a long, long time ago from.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. From Barbara Bond, who was in the Historic Society over in Stewart, Charles Bond's wife. And she told me about this story years ago. And on the day of September 11th, 2001, believe it or not, I'm in the Library of Virginia doing research on Jeb Stewart. I have a lot of letters and stuff. Well, I do a search and I noticed Patrick County, they had all this stuff about Notley P. Adams. So I asked them to bring me all the stuff about Notley P. Adams.
Notley P. Adams.
And Notley Price Adams was a guy who lived up, I think, near Meadows of Dan. And somehow, some way, he was accused of burning down the house of Jefferson Lawson. And Jefferson Lawson was ended up being a pretty big soldier in the war from Patrick County. I think he was in the 51st Virginia Infantry. Well, Notley has about 4 different trials, 2 in Patrick, 2 over in Henry. And he ends up going all the way to the governor of Virginia, who pardons him. And so they brought me a stack of paper. I'm telling you, it was that high. It was about 500 depositions of people from Patrick County during the war. And the story Barbara used to tell that she thought was funny, and I think still funny. She'd say he gets up in front of the judge at the trial, and the judge says, "State your name for the record." And he says, "Not Adams." And the judge says, "Well, if you're not Adams, who are you?" And he's like, "No, my name is not
That's
Adams."
hilarious. That's great.
And so it's about that. But the governor pardons him, and he comes back to Patrick County, and he dies about 10 years after the war. And this is how it's written in the Patrick County books. He said he died of a deranged mind.
Really?
Deranged mind.
He was very litigious. Every time you turn around, he'd be in a court case suing somebody or doing
Oh,
something.
no.
And But it was just fascinating to see who in Patrick County was for him and who was against him.
Wow.
And,
Controversial figure of Patrick County. Must be in the water.
It must be in the water.
I know quite a few controversial figures in Patrick County.
But anyway, that's how I got into that.
It's all that water that runs off the mountain.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, so
Got to keep them crazies up on the mountain, but their water runs downhill.
runs down to the Smith and the Dan.
Right,
And comes on down.
We're
and
just drinking it.
We're just drinking. But Patrick County has a tremendous Civil War history. We had about, I think, 1,500 men served in the war.
Wow.
And we only had a population, I believe I'm right, of about 2,500 white men who were eligible to serve, and 1,500 of them fought. And that's not unusual. That's typical for most Virginia counties. But just to show you, 1,500 of them, 25% probably died. 25% of them were wounded.
Yeah.
25% of them probably ended up in a prison camp. And the other 25% somehow got home, but who knows what kind of PTSD and all that kind of
Before
thing.
it was PTSD.
Yeah, before it
I can
was.
imagine what they saw.
Right.
But that's the men from Patrick County. I've written a book about that I call The Free State of Patrick, which my father always said was the best book I'd ever write. It was dedicated to him.
Oh, that's great.
But I just did a talk in front of the courthouse here a couple of weeks ago about the men from Patrick County. And I used to go to the high school when Glenn Burnett was the history teacher over there. He would invite me in, and I'd teach Civil War to all the 11th graders.
Great.
And I did that for about a decade. And Glenn left and went to Galax, and I went home and laid down. But now I have 30, 40-year-old people walking up to me, reminding me of when I came to their class when they were in high
stuff
school.
you don't ever forget.
No.
That's from your homeland. I mean, America's our homeland, but,
Well,
very proud to be from Patrick County.
People would say today, Jeb Stuart was a traitor to the United States because he fought for Confederacy. But Jeb Stuart, what he wasn't a traitor to was Patrick County in Virginia.
Right.
Because he looked at it as that was his country.
Yeah.
And we seem to have this thing today of looking at people in the past through our view, not their view. And the thing I hate to even quote a UVA professor, but Gary Gallagher used to always say, I'd do tours with him and Bob Crick, the historian at Fredericksburg Battlefield. Gary said, you can't look at it like that. You've got to go back to them and come forward. Because, they don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. They don't know that in 200 years that we will have such a negative view of them and things like that. So, you look at history from the past forward, not from the future back. That's just... none of us would want people looking at us like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair.
Right, that's not a fair way to judge somebody.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
I don't want to get too preachy, but that's
Do it. We're here. Be real.
Right.
that's part of what my portrait book is about. Now, I don't disparage Judge Clark about what he did, because the portrait's probably in a lot better place now. It's in the administration building and it's thing. There are other people that will do that for me. I don't have to do it myself. But
I'll just continue to think it.
But I think that we need to be very careful about the way we judge people, because it's not fair to them. It's not going to be fair to us. We sit here. I always look at. We all have these smartphones now.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And I wonder what kind of labor made all our smartphones. If those people are really free, or is that
Right.
slave labor that
It is.
does that?
Yeah.
And so that makes you and me awful human beings because we have a
Right.
smartphone.
Right.
When we were growing up working in tobacco, we didn't think about the fact that tobacco maybe killed people with lung cancer and so
Yeah.
forth. We used it as the only way we could make money as teenagers, and that's what we did. Now, looking back on it, I think the reason I never took up smoking is I worked in tobacco.
I just don't want to smell it no more.
Well, you see the chemicals and everything we
Lord.
put on that stuff, and I never really got sick, but some of the guys I grew up with would just get violently ill from the nicotine
Really?
poisoning. Yeah.
Huh.
The first time we'd go in the field to prime, it would just be awful for the next week. For some of those guys, it was just terrible. It was just terrible.
Well, right, but back to what you were saying, you shouldn't be judged for what you didn't know at that time. You know, you didn't know that stuff was as bad as they're saying it is now. You're making money.
Right.
And, you know, slavery, a horrible thing. Slavery, of course, though, was legal in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I think it was legal around the world.
Yeah.
We keep on saying, you know, it was legal in the United States, but I think we were one of the first countries to say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore.
Right.
The British were a little ahead of us on some of that. But, you know, a lot of countries, Portugal, Spain, a lot of those countries were not, and they were the ones who brought a lot of the slaves over here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can argue and go back and forth all day long about it.
There's still slaves today.
It's absolutely.
Right.
So, you know, what are we complaining about? We're complaining about a couple hundred years ago, or we're complaining what's going on this planet right now.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, human trafficking and all the kind of sort of things like that. But Stewart, the man, Jeb Stewart, the man, you know, he was an officer in the Army. He was an honorable fellow. He resigned his commission and then joined the Confederacy. It wasn't like he was doing anything behind the back. He did it the right way, and he ended up losing his life for it.
Right.
And
I was up in Richmond and just happened to look. I love going to graveyards. Kind of sounds freaky, but I love seeing the graveyards, and they had that Hollywood cemetery up there, and I found out there was some presidents buried up there.
And Jeb Stewart.
And I didn't know. And I get up there and walk out, and I'm going to walk the place. It's fairly large, and then I got back in my car and drove. And they would tell me where the presidents were and all this, and Jefferson Davis, the Confederate president. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And then all of a sudden on the map, I see Jeb Stewart, and I was like, what? And his wife. And I was like, oh, my gosh, that's Patrick County. I'm from Patrick County, and there's Jeb buried right up here.
And Jeb's buried there with his grandson, the third, and his grandson, the fourth.
Oh,
Jeb
really?
Stewart, the fourth, are all buried there now.
Huh.
Jeb Jr. is actually, believe it or not, buried in Arlington National Cemetery because he served in the Spanish-American War.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I think a little bit in World War I as a civilian, but he's in Arlington.
Huh.
And that's kind of fun to see a grave that says Jeb Stewart in
Yeah.
Arlington National Cemetery.
Yeah.
But Jeb, they had a tremendous military tradition. Jeb IV was a colonel in Vietnam, and his dad was an engineer. And Jeb V was a lieutenant colonel and is an orthopedic surgeon.
Wow.
I
just went on down through there.
I'm not done. We're still
no.
going. I believe Jeb VI is a JAG lawyer in D.C. I think he's a JAG lawyer. So their military tradition
Ain't that
continues.
something? Yeah.
So I've known 4 Jeb Stewarts in my life.
Ain't that something?
I've known 4.
Well, Tom, we got to wrap it up here. I just got the finger.
Oh, did we get that already?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I missed that.
We
I always
definitely
miss that.
would love to have you back. I know
Sure.
there's a lot of more that we can learn of Patrick County, and we ain't even tippy-toed around Henry County. Yeah. So I definitely want to learn more. But I greatly
Yes, sir.
appreciate
Pleasure.
you driving all the way up here.
Oh, yeah.
I know
Yes,
Ararat
thank you very
In a
much.
hailstorm.
Nice to meet you.
in a hailstorm, and I know Ararat's no small drive from here either. It's kind of the other side of Patrick County. So I live over here in Spencer now, which is still in Patrick County, but we hardly ever go to Mount Airy.
Yeah.
And so I know how, if you're living in Ararat, it's Mount Airy probably instead of driving all the way to Martinsville. So it's Martinsville's just a hop, skip, and jump. But we thank you so much for coming out here.
Pleasure.
The knowledge. Again, you can pick up his books just about anywhere, but I would say Amazon's the number one thing. I'll put the links down in the bottom of our YouTube video so y'all can go check that out. And if you're interested in the books, I know 2 that I want right now.
Right.
I already own 2, so I want to get 2 more. So that's going to be pretty neat. So thank you again, Tom, for coming out here, and I can't wait to share this and let people learn a little bit. And again, you'll be back.
Yes, sir.
So praise
Thank
the
you.
Lord. Yes. All right.
All right. Well, that's it. Y'all be real and come on back.
Be real. Please like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Thank you.